In his State of the Union speech on Tuesday, February 24th, President Trump did not discuss many foreign policy issues, but he did say a few words about the Islamic Republic of Iran. In particular, I will never allow the world's number one sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have nuclear weapons. He noted that the regime massacred at least 32,000 unarmed civilians in January, that's his number, and that it killed and maimed thousands of American service members with what's called roadside bombs. We're recording this episode of Foreign Policy on Friday morning, February 27th, and this just in. U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, has told his embassy staff they might want to leave Israel, like maybe today. And the U.S. Department of State is advising American citizens not to travel to Israel at this time. Is this just the application of a bit more pressure on Tehran? Or is it, let's not say a war, but perhaps a military expedition about to begin? To discuss this and other topics of current interest, we have with us Behnam Taleblu, Senior Director of FDD's Iran program, and Reuel Marc, former Iran targets officer in the Central Intelligence Agency and now resident scholar at FDD. I'm Cliff May, and I'm pleased you're in the virtual room with us here on Foreign Policy. Well, welcome, gentlemen. Good to see you both.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you.
So, where's to start? The USS Gerald Ford is arriving in Israel today as the U.S. continues a really massive military buildup. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, has told reporters that a Senate resolution blocking the use of military force against Iran without congressional authorization is likely to come up for a vote next week. What are you guys reading in these and other tea leaves? Reuel, you start.
Well, I would probably go back to the president, and that I have read, I think, just about everything he's ever said about the Islamic Republic since 1979. And I don't recommend that other people do that. But I have to say, there is a consistent animus against the Islamic Republic. And there are very few principles or sentiments which are consistent with Donald Trump over the decades, but this appears to be one of them. And it springs, I think, from the hostage crisis, and it has stayed with them. So I strongly suspect that his deal-making imperative aside, that the president intends to bomb, and he may have intended to bomb from the very beginning. I hesitate there just because he does love to make deals, and he does believe that the use of force and coercion will give him a stronger position and that they might be able to get a good deal. But I think that aside, he has been prepared to attack from the beginning.
And go ahead, Behnam. Where do you see this? I mean, everything I just mentioned, they obviously know in Tehran. Do they say, okay, I guess we have to move from our position. We don't want to get hit. Or do they say, you know what? We're not moving from our position. We have a right to enrich uranium. That right is, I don't know where it comes from, not from the Bill of Rights, not from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I don't know, comes from Allah maybe. I had never seen anything in the Quran, but maybe you have, about a right to enrich uranium. Where are they right now?
Well, just great to be with you guys again. Just on that rights business, even the NPT, the document, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which the Iranians allege gives them that right, is actually silent on the matter. This is a whole international legal question, but we don't necessarily recognize the right of others to enrich. But just recently, you had the U.S., you had Marco Rubio saying they're not enriching. That's the second time a major political figure said they're not enriching, because the first one after the 12-day war was Rafael Grossi, the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency Director General. And that's big because since April 2006, nothing to include sanctions, nothing to include covert action, nothing to include sabotage, nothing to include deals, diplomacy, nothing stopped the Islamic Republic from enriching uranium on its own soil for a single day. And the reason, as you know, the regime is interested in this is because at the very least, it's keeping open the option to domestically make a weapon or to domestically, sneak out and produce a nuclear weapon. So these guys, I think, right now are so wedded to that idea of keeping that options open that they want to play to the edge against the president. They played to the edge in 2025 and lost. They thought they could play for time, but the president was actually fairly legalistic about the 2-month window that he gave them. He's given them anywhere from 10 to 15 days this time. I do believe he saw the very vivid images that were coming out of Iran in early January 2026 with the protests and concur with Reuel that he did want to bomb, but we simply didn't have the force structure in place because of Venezuela. And now that he's amassed the force structure there, the question is, where will he go? Because he's got equal inclination to be commander-in-chief as much as he does to be negotiator-in-chief or deal-maker-in-chief. But at the same exact time, where the Iranians are, and I think we're living through a gigantic social science experiment, is the current supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, may not be ready to do what his predecessor did, Ruhollah Khomeini, and drink from the poison chalice. He may try to take everyone down with him, or he may make you burn the country to get him, or he may,
or Behnam, none of the above. He may just absorb the bombing.
He may absorb the bombing, but then we'd be, I'm not really sure what to do with that because he would be much worse off after the bombing. There's no situation that they're better off.
No, I disagree with that. I think if he absorbs the bombing, he's better off.
I mean, every day that Donald Trump doesn't drop a massive ordnance penetrator on Pasteur Street, he's better off. I mean, every day that this man has survived peak American unipolarity. This man has survived invasions to his left and to his right. The fact that it took the cycle of violence in the post-October 7 Middle East to get him and to bring the fire this close, that's, we're in aftertime. He is the Middle East's most successful autocrat. Those are already things on the epitaph. It's just a matter of how the story comes to an end and the number of cost. And the cost is going to be measured in lives and money and blood and treasure.
He doesn't care about that.
We care about that. That's what we do.
No, he doesn't care about that. And I mean, he survived. He survived the United States. He survived Israel, and he anticipates surviving this. So the worst thing he could do is to make concessions.
That I agree with.
That's a death note. So
FTD's Marc says that it would be a good idea in this instance for the U.S. to target Ali Khamenei himself and his son, who is the most likely successor, and be rid of them both. And I'm curious to know if you agree. And by the way, I do want to mention you had a very good piece and a counterintuitive piece in some ways in the Wall Street Journal, Reuel, about the strength of this regime. And
New York Times.
New York Times, excuse me.
Yeah, they like to publish those things.
Yeah. And you have a piece dated today in Foreign Affairs, not Foreign Policy, Foreign Affairs, the prestigious journal Foreign Affairs, as is often said. I want you both to elaborate on what's in those. But I also want to get to this question. I mean, if I'm Ali Khamenei, I'm 86, 87 years old. I might think I don't want to die in my bed. I'm a true believer. I want to die a martyr. And the way I die a martyr is Trump hits me. And that's good because then there are 72 black-eyed virgins waiting for me because I have fulfilled my destiny as I always throughout my life wanted to do. That's a possibility too. He doesn't have the same psychology that President Trump has, or you have, or I have, right?
No. I would say this. I don't think if the supreme leader were to die, and certainly not if his son were to die, I think the Islamic Republic would survive. I think people tend to focus a bit too much sometimes on the personality and not on the institutions. And I think the Islamic Republic institutionally for a Middle Eastern state is pretty solid. So I think they could absorb that hit and go on. Some might even say the United States would be doing them a favor because there is certainly, I think, a desire amongst the ruling elite who are loyal to the supreme leader for perhaps there to be a new generation So, and I don't think that new generation would bring pragmatism, or what we would call pragmatism. So, I don't think you're going to shock the system from the top, decapitate it. I think it will probably hold. That if you want to actually shock the system, you're going to have to eliminate the security services, not just at the top, but regionally. And that's a big ask. I'm not sure that either the Americans or the Israelis have the wherewithal to do that from the air. So I'm skeptical that you're going to get a collapse of the regime through any air campaign. It's possible down the road that it might re-energize the most critical element, and that is those in Iran willing to take to the streets again. And you might get larger demonstrations than what we saw recently in January. You would have to have larger demonstrations because the regime successfully used coercion, automatic weapons fire, and killed a lot of people and put it down. So, yeah.
But is there not utility in enfeebling the Islamic Republic of Iran in the hope of destroying it? But if you don't, an enfeebled Islamic Republic, one that can't enrich uranium, one that can't supply its terrorist proxies, one that can't do very much, is still useful, is it not? And go ahead, Tim.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have been in favor of striking the Islamic Republic over and over again throughout the years, and I would do that first and foremost because of condign punishment. I mean, they have killed American citizens over the years and gotten away with it. Both Republican and Democratic administrations have allowed them to engage in a whole variety of machinations against us, and they paid very little price. And I believe there is no shelf life, statute of limitations on those actions. Yes, I mean, I think what Donald Trump hasn't realized, and I think the Israelis have since October 7, 2023, is that once you engage in this, in military action, I would argue that happened in the 12-day war, diplomacy's finished. So the United States is essentially, unless it chooses to withdraw and just ignore it, and Donald Trump could do that, that the only effective option you have for is to mow the lawn. That's what the Israelis have to do now. They have to strike, not when a threat is imminent, they have to strike the threat routinely. And I would argue that the American course of action now with the Islamic Republic is to strike it routinely. Now, that's extremely difficult for Americans to do. I know of no instance historically where we've ever done that. But I would suggest that's where we are now. The notion of retreating back to diplomacy, I think, is an illusion, and that we are in a very hot Cold War, and that the only other option is essentially to ignore it and walk away from it.
Let me, I apologize, I want you to get on this too, but I got to ask this question, what Reuel said. Why can't, and why wouldn't we think this is a real possibility? President Trump hit some important targets, then hold back and say essentially to the Ayatollah, are you sure you don't want to change your mind? Come back to the table with more compromises. Because if you don't, we're taking a lunch break, but that's all we're taking.
Well, I think the Iranian response to that, and we should know that the Iranian response to that is going to be biloch, and I'll allow Behnam to translate that. I don't think that's a viable option. I think it's an illusion.
And let's unpack here for you.
The translation for the video viewers is, it's a thumbs up, but the thumbs up in Persian is the equivalent of the middle finger. Khamenei would be 2 thumbs up to that proposal.
I remember that when we go after liberation, and people ask us how you like Iran. It's great.
It is older. I mean, it is an older thing now. Now you see people not necessarily taking as much offense to it, but the older generation, yeah, they'll get a little perturbed.
All right.
I had a question for Reuel from the first segment, which is, you said men striking the regional forces. How does that help with the domestic balance internally? Is that just because they brought Shia militias to do repression, or are we trying to still shock and awe and shake the system? And then I'll get to Cliff's question, but I just wanted to ask.
Oh, it's just because the security services are relatively decentralized. So if you want to weaken them, if you want to take them off the street, then I think you have to hit them all over the country.
Oh, in the country. I thought you meant regionally.
No. I mean, in the country. Now, the Israelis may well have targeting information like that, but I suspect that this time round, you don't get to be as lucky as they were the first time. I don't think you're going to be blowing up anybody in their bedrooms. So, it's a very huge ask to have the type of tactical intelligence that would allow air power to be effective at severely weakening the regional security services that keep the regime in power.
Yeah, I wanted to build on this because even though I think Reuel's piece and my piece sound thematically different, I think in terms of our analysis of the situation, and again, this month is 13 years of me at FED. We've done everything that we can to stabilize the situation, help the Iranian people, maximum support, maximum pressure, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And this was a very bitter piece for me to write, particularly given that, I grew up reading and watching Reuel. You guys have heard this story so many times, and especially about military intervention in Iraq, and even just being a first-generation American in New York and post 9/11, all of that. But the piece I wrote, and again, I'm still grappling with how I got there, is go big. It is go big. It is to push away from all this, the logic of limited war and sanctions and one-off. This is a forcing function of this moment, is for the U.S. military to go big. It is a go big or go home moment, both for the president personally, both for the U.S. strategically, and then, what's left of us as a society morally. But in terms of the threat, in terms of the opportunity to really deal with the threat, and then to potentially push for something that we haven't had in the Middle East for a very, very long time, in terms of the chance for a win, this requires the U.S. military to go big.
And when you say go big, just to define that, I assume you mean a decisive defeat. In other words,
I mean,
Turan delenda est, right? Like, and by the way, just those who don't get that, I'm paraphrasing Cato the Elder, who said Carthago delenda est in every speech in the Roman Senate, because he said, basically he was saying was, we don't let Carthage live to fight us again. And that's why today you can see Roman ruins, but you can't see Carthaginian ruins because it was gone.
Yeah, I don't want to do scorched earth, because I think the chance is not, there's no doubt Israel and America can destroy the Islamic Republic. But I think, again, the chance for the win here is to actually be able to, the end state is not to destroy the Islamic Republic. We're trying to stop a nuclear Iran, and we're trying to build a better Middle East. The means to that end is regime change. The way to that mean is now major military action. And this major military action, Cliff, as you were asking about, is it about going after the supreme leader, yes or no? As Reuel was saying, I believe, for three main reasons, this is not Venezuela. One, the military capabilities of the Islamic Republic simply make it not so. The Islamic Republic has responded to Trump's most decisive uses of force, even if only symbolically, but those symbolic things were big. In response to the killing of Soleimani, the U.S. received the biggest ballistic missile barrage in recorded history at those bases. In response to the taking out of its enrichment facilities, we lost it's $15 million, but an expensive geodesic radome, a secure communications satellite device at the Al Udeid base in Qatar that was struck with Iranian missiles. Yes, these were performative. Yes, the Iranians telegraphed it, but they did it. And that's important. And also, they're the only ones who, within the course of, I think, a year and a half, have struck two nuclear-armed countries 4 times with ballistic missiles and lived to tell the tale. So we really are in uncharted territory when it comes to the regime and its use of force. And that alone says that we're going to have to go big against the military capabilities of this. So that's why it's not a one and done. The second is, I agree wholeheartedly with Reuel. Khamenei, and we were talking about this before, why he's so successful. He has institutionalized his authority, his power, his worldview, and his system. He built institutions by Middle Eastern standards, so this is very relative. We're not thinking Jeffersonian here, but we're thinking overlapping centers of power. The Islamic Republic, even though we say supreme leader and he is the most powerful person, doesn't look like a pyramid today. It looks like a series of overlapping pillars where the traditional institution is checked by the revolutionary institution, where the elect institution is checked by the unelected institution, where the legal lines of authority are blurred and checked by the informal and personalist lines of authority, where there's a musical chairs of elite that come and go. And all of this is really how Khamenei, who had really seemingly no particular talents when he became supreme leader in 1989, bested every single one of Iran's fractious factions, its domestic rivals, and unfortunately, increasingly the population, and then clung to that worldview, was emboldened by success, and played to the edge against adversaries abroad. He enabled...
Just goes to show how a failed poet can really be good at hard politics.
Failed poets are dangerous, exactly. And so for this reason, the state structure is very different. And I'll wrap up here, the society. Predating the Venezuela operation, we didn't have the most massive protests in the modern history of Venezuela, but we just did have that with Iran in late December, early January. Nor did we have the kind of street pressure from the Maduro regime. Yes, it was authoritarian. Yes, there was pressure, but nowhere near the number of deaths and the speed of those deaths. So for those three reasons, if we're going to be entertaining military options, it is going big, because the regime is actually thinking, a la Reuel, that it can limp along, that it can absorb a strike. And if they are all now, and by they, the military establishment, the religious establishment, the political establishment, are all singing from the same sheet of music, that if there's a strike, they will go big against that strike, even if it's limited. In that case, well, then they would be sealing their fate. And I think the goal now should be to use massive military power to defang the military capabilities and degrade the security state. And that requires drilling down level 2, 3, 4, 5 of some units. It's expensive. It's costly. It is not a campaign. It is not an operation. It is a campaign. And we have to conceive
war,
it.
Or is it a campaign? I mean, is there a distinction?
Oh, it's a war. It's a war. Let's not.
Military operation, expedition.
But I used the word campaign contra to operation. But yeah, we are in the war. We are in the shooting war.
I might just add one thing, or Behnam.
Because the purpose is to get you defang the military capabilities, and you use military force to drill down against the security surfaces in the hopes of actually having the streets ignite. And this is where it gets messy. But this is where the population today, there are 6 days of protests across Iran's campuses. If the population was really cowed by the 36 to 43,000 killed in the most recent protests, they wouldn't be coming up with some of the most crazy protest slogans that I ever heard on these campuses. I mean, we are at the point now where there's straight up curses in these protest slogans.
Yeah, no, I would say you need more than universities.
We need more.
Universities are always a good ignition point, but you need to go way beyond them. And we'll have to see. I also have to say, I don't disagree with your description of what needs to be done, but I do wonder whether we have anywhere close to the intelligence to do that. We would be dependent upon whatever the Israelis have gathered, because I'm willing to bet large quantities of money that the Americans simply don't have the type of tactical intelligence to go after the security services.
Well, when we say go after I'd like to be a little more specific, if you can, on what the high value targets of highest priority should be. Are they headquarters for the Basij and for the IRGC? Are they the launch grades? Yes, go ahead.
Headquarters in Tehran, headquarters in all the major cities. I don't think these individuals are going to be on bases. They're going to be called up from their homes. So you're not going to. I don't think the strikes will be very effective against military compounds, but you certainly should go after any headquarters facility. It's going to be extremely difficult to do, because it's not a surprise now. There is no surprise factor. So I'm skeptical we're going to have we'll have the intelligence to do that. And the both the Americans and the Israelis are inclined to go after the nuke sites, the missiles. These things are important, particularly for the Israelis, since they're starting to put the missiles underground. And whether the Israelis have the capacity to take these things out is, I think, in question. So the Israelis obviously need the Americans to go after these technical sites. But somebody, if they really want to have an impact, needs to think more about the security services. But do we have the information to do that? I do not know.
One possibility that strikes me, and I don't know the answer to this, is there are communication systems that can be shut down if you have proper cyber weapons to do that. Maybe they can still send carrier pigeons or find other ways to send orders, but if they're all hiding in various places, they have to communicate with one another. If you can stop them from communicating, they're kind of paralyzed, aren't they?
And yes, and what you also do want to take care of is you want to have the incentive for individual survival, local survival, to trump training and to trump organizational cohesion. So once you drill down, level 2, 3, 4 of security services, once you decapitate, once you go after command and control, once you impede communications, and people see that, people are not going to, if the behavior of the U.S. military and the Israeli military is like the 12-day war, the behavior of the population will be like the 12-day war, where you run and hide. But if the targeting moves and it shifts to a consistent pattern of targeting what's the repressive apparatus, the government institutions, in so many ways, taking down Khamenei's compound is more important than killing Khamenei. In so many ways, taking down the Islamic Republic of Iran broadcasting is more important than, broadcasting one positive radio note or hacking into the state broadcast, like completely taking it down. In so many ways, these are the things that put muscle behind the street, because what the regime knows it can't win is a two-front war. And a two-front war, I mean a major foreign military intervention that spurs domestic protests, which is exactly why after the 12-day war, they arrested 21,000 people, most of which for charges of liking some pro-Israel post on Facebook. And then during this round of protests, one of the reasons I believe they shot so hard and so heavy and so fast is because they were trying to prevent a contagion effect of domestic protests bleeding into foreign intervention. And they saw the writing on the wall. They saw the multiple rounds of street protests. They saw the swelling and the demography and geography of Iranian protesters. They thought they could wait it out. It couldn't. It just happened to grow. President Trump's statements, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi's statements. The Islamic Republic thought the cavalry was coming. They literally thought the cavalry was coming, and their theory was, we have to shoot our way out of the crisis because we can't fight a two-front war. So we have to bring forward that which they fear. Otherwise, we are in a world of limited military options. And I agree with you, Cliff, that the Israelis are rightly concerned about the missile issue. I just wanted to add one note that I added in the piece, which is, in this campaign, there have to be a series of operations that are nested on each other, where the success of one operation enables the other. The first one, obviously, is the suppression of the air defenses. The next one is the longest one, and that's the defanging one. And why do I say this is the longest? Is because, like you said, a lot of this stuff is moved underground. And Iran has chains of bases where the Israelis were able to force the Iranians from operating from further and further afield. But what we have that necessarily the Israelis may not have is the ability to collapse the entire base or to seal the entries of these bases by bombing the physical geography. And in this, where the Israelis went after the launcher to prevent dealing with massive volleys of missiles, what we can do is collapse the building to not have to deal with the launchers or the missiles. And this actually matters in the medium to long term for Iranian protesters, because since the Women Life Freedom Movement, hardline Iranian pro-regime commentators have been saying, don't think that in the end of day situation, where if you decapitate the regime or you get foreign military support, don't think that we'll turn over our missiles to you. We will fire what we have at whatever little terrain that you've occupied. So therefore, it's critical to get this stuff off the battlefield, not just for the sake of Israel or the U.S. bases, but also for the Iranian people, to disable this main tool. And then the success of the defanging tool allows you to go into the political mission. And the X factor in my mind right now is I have doubts as to both America's will and capability, and Israel's will and capability to continue the target set past symbolic targeting in the political space. They'll do the suppression of air defense, they'll do the defanging, and then we'll get to a little bit of the counterproliferation on the nuclear, and then we'll get to the political. And the question will be, how long will they focus military assets on political targets? Because from political, after that, you go to security services. And this is already a very long campaign. But that's why, in my view, it is go big or go home. And I know what Reuel is thinking, and I don't want to be this guy, but I fear that Reuel, if he reads this essay, he will, and I'll probably be in the deadweight loss of it, but he will say that I am channeling Ken's Iraq book, which I don't want to do.
Right. Was it Brookings? Was it AI? All that. Right.
Where the supporters of a strike looked to Ken's book and said, you just put a poison pill in this thing and there's no way we can do it because there's all these crazy things that we have to do first. And then the detractors of a strike said, you just paved the pathway for the strike and gave them the playbook. And that's why I said writing this piece, I tried to be as intellectually honest as possible, but I did have to lay out the order of operations. And in doing that, you do see all the costs, let alone dealing with the after.
Pick up from there.
I would come back to this. I have if the United States could deploy helicopter gunships into Iran, then I might be more optimistic about what we can actually do to help protesters in Iran. And undoubtedly, I don't know what the time frame is when they're going to come back on the streets, because but they will. I think we can say with absolute certainty that the Islamic Republic is permanently unstable. It's a volcano, and it will erupt again. Exactly when that happens, I don't know. So far, the regime has been very adept, sometimes a little slow, but very adept at putting down rebellions, which have never really been insurrections. And I would emphasize that word because there is no leadership in the Islamic Republic, oppositional leadership, nothing really to speak of. It's extremely hard for the opposition to cohere and to operate in a way that could be much more effective against the regime. So they have to use numbers. You need big numbers out on the streets. That is a target. And, the Basij and the Revolutionary Guard Corps have a lot of bullets. And there was this assumption in a lot of quarters before January that if Persians, and I emphasize that word as opposed to Iranian, if the Persians security services had to shoot Persians, not the ethnic minorities, then they would be loath to do so or hesitant to do so. I think what we saw in January is that Persians are quite capable of killing other Persians. So the regime has proven, I think, that it's got capacity. So we need to see numbers on the streets that overwhelm their capacity. I just don't know if that's going to happen. I hope so.
Something that I think needs to be understood is that there isn't as coherent an opposition as one would like. There's quite a bit of support for Reza Pahlavi, the son of the late Shah, for sure, but it's not entirely. On the other hand, when you have a seriously repressive regime, it is very hard for an opposition to form, because the solace approach is to kill not only the leaders of the opposition, but those who might become leaders of the opposition. So the Shah himself in the 1970s, he allowed an opposition to grow. He could have taken care of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini in a suburb of Paris without too much difficulty, I imagine. He didn't do so, and that allowed him, the Ayatollah, to gain the power he gained. Gorbachev was not terribly repressive, and that allowed the Soviet Union to collapse. But 1989, Tiananmen Square, the Chinese communists said, we're going to kill thousands of Chinese. We're going to stay in power, whatever happens. This is more like that. Now, again, I think that doesn't mean you say, and you guys please disagree with me, oh, well, there's nothing we can do. The Islamic Republic of Iran is going to stay in power. It's going to build nuclear weapons. It's going to enrich. It's going to have proxies, and there's nothing we can do about it. Maybe.
No, I mean, technically, first of all, the exterior stuff, there's a lot you can do about it. The Israelis demonstrated, the Americans helped a little bit. The Israelis demonstrated that you can effectively gut the proxies, damage them severely. And I would argue the Islamic Republic doesn't get to recover from the loss of Syria. So Syria has rendered them in a very bad situation, and I don't think they get to recover. I think the late Revolutionary Guard Corps General Hamadani was correct when he said, if you lose Syria, we have essentially lost the revolution in the West. That is the Arab West. So I think that is true. I think that has happened. I don't think that much about Iraq. I mean, it's possible that they could use it to harass the Americans, but for the most part, I don't think Iraq is terribly useful in their campaign against Israel and the United States. So effectively, the proxy capacity of the Islamic Republic has been vastly reduced. So I think we're quite capable of damaging them there. The area that is much, much harder is inside the country. And there, I think you have to be realistic. You might get lucky. And you should always assume that there's going to be another eruption of discontent, and the eruptions keep getting bigger. But you just don't have a timeline on that.
Timeline is soon. I mean, can I just, because you guys threw two big grenades about opposition and internal, and I feel like I really have to respond because with respect, the facts, I think, don't belie that. Reza Pahlavi internally and externally has drawn crowds that I don't even think President Donald Trump can draw. So the first thing I will say with that is the West has to stop with this business of the perfect is the enemy of the good. Now, Reza Pahlavi has opposition exiled leader syndrome problem in reverse. Whereas in reverse, these guys tend to have great Western contacts, great elite support, but very poor grassroots support. He has the exact opposite. There's a lot of Western hesitancy, a lot of elite skepticism, but amazing grassroots support. And nothing like the past 2 months shows that better. And now the folks who were keen to doubt the past 2 months were the ones who missed the separation from, rather than the commingling of nationalism in Iran with other Islamisms, the separation, the entire dividing of it. Now, it's possible that you lose the terrain there, but nationalism, the more that has grown as an ideology and full opposition to Islamism and to the Islamic Republic, the more salient this potential Pahlavi thing becomes. And I agree with you both that it is impossible to really create an opposition in such a brutal regime. I mean, yes, Cliff, you're right. The Shah could have gone after Khomeini. Even Saddam offered the chance to the monarchy. Do you want me to get rid of this guy? He's causing too much trouble. The Shah didn't take that shot. But even then, something had to come from abroad. Even then, even in the Shah's comparatively milder authoritarian system, when you look at the rest of the modern Middle East, something had to come from abroad. So the only coherent political system, the only coherent thing that could function as a network under the Shah's Iran was unfortunately the clerical networks. And that is what gave this network the edge. And then Reuel mentioned the I word, insurgent. That's why many of the other social forces that brought about the 1979 revolution were actually armed forces. It's hard to make the case when you look at the balance of forces that many of them were democracy-seeking forces. Many of them had legitimate, many of the Iranian population had social grievances, political grievances, but when you look at the role, the street play of a lot of the forces that made the revolution, in particular two groups, the Fedayeen Khalq and the Mujahideen Khalq, these are armed groups, disciplined, cult-like. They really had like an insurgent battle plan against the Shah's conscripts. And so that's what we don't have. And that's what
So I don't think they were that decisive. I think the decisive element was what Cliff said in the beginning, and that is the Shah just was unprepared to, shed the tide of blood that Brzezinski wanted him to. So, and I'm all for outside support. Absolutely. I mean, where would we be if it hadn't been for Lafayette? So, outside,
Right here. Right
outside support is critical, and those people who dismiss it just are historically ignorant. But my concern is they need to replicate what we saw in 2009. And instead of having Mousavi, who at that time was essentially still part of the regime, they need to have leadership that will send 2 million people, directly against the supreme leader's home. You need to go after the institutions. I didn't see that in the last demonstrations.
European diplomats said 1.5 million people were on the street on the night of January 8th into January 9.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Without
and you could say I know you love
totally
2009 analogy, but we have to push past.
You need to have even a larger number.
I agree. We need numbers
because the regime proved that they could disperse squash. So you need to have even more, because once it became clear that Iranians Dessous, the Persians, were willing to kill other Persians in large numbers, then we've got a problem.
Let me push back on this as well, because there is no asset test. The IRGC is actually they're based on conscripts. And those conscripts come from 31 different provinces.
Well,
the only volunteer force is the Basij paramilitary, which is integrated into the IRGC ground forces. And I am willing to bet that no one was doing ethnicity checks either on the street side of the equation on January 8, January 9, nor on the military force side of the equation on January 8, January 9. I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, which is the sentiment of what I believe Reuel is saying is a question that has long been in the people, in the minds of the people who studied Arab authoritarianism, which is, can you always use large volumes of military force against your compatriots, against people who look like you, against people who think like you, against all of that? So there, unfortunately, the Islamic Republic passed the test that they could really use weapons of war in a big way against their compatriots. But I don't think it was about the Persian, nor do I think it was about the ethnic-rural divide. It was about, would they fire simply when they saw the numbers? Because there's a big difference between 2009, admittedly, Reuel, you're right, 2 to 3 million people, according to Roger Cohen, New York Times, chanting just quietly, sukut, sukut, silence. And then 1.5 million in Tehran with the background looking like a bombed, burned out video game, angry, burning Islamic Republic flags, taking down Soleimani statues.
Behnam, I think you're making my argument.
No, I agree with you. We need the volume. Absolutely. In the absence of coherent, localized organization, we need volume. That's 100% right. But I don't think it's the Persian, non-Persian, center periphery issue.
That's because you're an Iranian patriot and you want to believe.
I'm a mix.
That's a great.
My name.
You're hoping the great Iranian spirit encapsulates all of the people inside of the Islamic Republic. I'm not so sure, but I'll defer on this at this moment.
Let me just to be clear, are you both agreeing on, there are things you're obviously disagreeing, but are you agreeing on this, that there's massive American military power in the region right now? You're only afraid it's not going to be used to full effect. Although what you're saying, Reuel, is it still should be used, enfeeble this regime because look, home, if we withdraw, that's a humiliation to have all this there and then do nothing with it because you couldn't figure out what to do. That would not be a...
I mean, I'm in favor of always going big. I mean, would that we'd gone big when the Iranians blew up the Marine base and the American embassy in Beirut in 1983. Right. Go big. You won't be sorry if you go big. I'm just skeptical that we have the capacity and the intelligence and the means to effect the ground game. We might get lucky. You won't get lucky if you go small. That's for certain. But I don't know if we go big, we're likely to see success. And there is a downside to that. I'm prepared to live with that downside, which is the regime. If we go big and they're able to handle the society at large, then that will give them greater spirit and confidence that they have absorbed the worst that the great Satan can throw at them, and they're still standing.
The question in terms is always, in regard to any policy proposal, is what's the alternative? And it seems to me the alternative can't be to say, you know what, we can't do everything we want to do, or we're not sure we can do. So let's do nothing at this point. I think we're beyond that at that point now. Do you disagree with that?
I mean, I think we're beyond that point only because, as I said before, Donald Trump has, I think, this longstanding animus. Otherwise,
The reason,
otherwise, it's entirely possible for the Americans to play the diplomatic game and get some deeply dissatisfying agreement with the Islamic Republic and avoid war.
right? And then Rhodes and Obama will say, "Good job, Donald Trump. You did what we tried to do back 10 years ago." And I don't think that's a good solution to this. Let me just say this: this regime has been at war with us since 1979. It has made its commitment, its vow, its policy very clear, its death to America. Now the question has been since then, how do we achieve the means to fulfill that end? And it's nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles to deliver them to American targets. That's how they do it. They need to be stopped. The JCPOA, we all agreed at FDD, did not stop them. Maybe it delayed them till after the Obama administration. So this is a point where at least this regime can be enfeebled for sure. And with luck,
Yeah, I mean,
more than that.
I agree with that to an extent. I mean, the Islamic Republic has never been an existential threat to the United States. It never will be.
One nuclear device on intercontinental missile doesn't mean the America is over. It does mean some city is over, and that's we don't have the ability. As Saddam Hussein properly said, to accept 10,000 casualties in one battle.
But the Islamic Republic, in my mind, has never been suicidal. We may get to see if they've changed their mind on that, but they have not proven themselves suicidal. One of the reasons that Israeli intelligence has been better than American intelligence on Iran by a long shot is that Iran is an existential threat to the Israelis.
And these Israelis understand that to hit Israel is to hit America in another sense. Israel is the extension of Israel is the little Satan, is the extension of America in the Middle East. Rid of that, and America is set back.
It is. I agree with that, but I'm just saying because the Israelis are in danger seriously in danger, existentially in danger from any Iranian nuke, that they adopt attitudes. They're much more bold in how they approach the Islamic Republic. The Americans have never felt that. No time in the Central Intelligence Agency that I had certainly witnessed did the agency ever view the Islamic Republic as an existential threat. Because of that, you just took a different attitude to how you would conduct operations. That is now a problem, I would argue, for the Americans because our intelligence simply isn't probably up to what it needs to be. And I can only cross my fingers and hope that if we do decide to go big, that the Israelis have sufficient tactical intelligence to make that at least a plausible option.
So try this. The Americans say, we're going to go in and we're going to do what's necessary from an America First point of view. There are things that are a danger to us. There are things that President Trump said, help's on its way. I've got certain targets I'm going to hit over the period of a few days. And then to the Israelis, now after that, you do what you need to do. You have our blessing. Make sense?
I guess so. I mean, if Donald Trump has decided to abandon the search for some diplomatic solution,
There's no diplomatic solution. We talk about it being talking about.
I know that, you know that. I'm not 100% convinced that Donald Trump, the deal maker, that side of him, he's got multiple sides, that side of him is now over. If that search for some diplomatic solution is finished, then yes, I could certainly see Donald Trump going to the Israelis and say, continue.
A lot is riding on Iran's responses here, by the way.
Yeah.
If what they all say, and again, they are singing from the same sheet of music here, which is always a little odd because they also have a hard time herding cats, that they will respond in a big way. In the chance that it's a bluff, well, then they're just good poker players. And if it deters a strike, they take the win. But in the chance that it's true, it would have been true only because the Islamic Republic's image of Donald Trump would be filtered through a certain ideational lens of American restraint and isolationism, that all you need to do is, cause a little bit of damage, spill a little bit of blood, hint to the cycle of violence, and do some spooking of the oil market while you're there, and he will cut and run. Whereas in reality, I think these guys are just super animated by the rising anti-Israel commentary and analysis on a certain flank of the American body politic. And they think that the president is more politically boxed in, and therefore, unlike in the past, they will not do something quote unquote symbolic or performative or telegraphed, that they have to go hard and fast early, and that will deter Trump. And I actually fear that the Islamic Republic actually has all the weapons, it has all the capacity, it has all the capability to be successful militarily in going hard and fast early. And then they will spill blood, and then they will realize the image of the president they had is a caricature. Because if there is one through line through the president, is he will absorb all the other stuff. But when it comes to killing an American, that's his real red line. Look at what his first public statement after October 7, how he framed it, how he talked about the Americans that were the hostage. Look at May 2019 to December 2019 Iraq. He took, I think, anywhere from 40 to 60 drone, rocket, mortar attacks on U.S. facilities, but 1 or 3 Americans died in some cycle of violence in late December. That paved the pathway to the killing of Soleimani. So Trump's red line is the use of force, and I think the Islamic Republic is really gambling that if they spill blood and spook him, that he'll turn away. With this firepower that is arrayed, that can sustain operations for weeks, nothing would induce the president more than going from a defanging and counterproliferation mission to a counter-regime mission than the regime proving it is lethal and willing to spill American blood. And that is actually, I think, the escalation spiral that we're headed towards.
May I just say I've always searched for the opportunity to casually use the word ideational, and you just did it, and I'm very jealous.
Was it casual?
Yeah, it was very casual. It was just well done. I'm jealous.
Thank you. I was going to a lot of I could make it more.
I have many other topics, but I'm going to close with this one comment and get your thoughts on this. And that is, I mentioned that Mike Huckabee, the ambassador, has said to staff at the Israeli embassy, you might want to leave, and please do so. He said, you can take a plane anywhere and then go, just get out of here. For now, you'll be safer. I guess because he thinks the embassy could be a target. Israelis are not all leaving. The Israelis are planning for this and various contingencies, I have to figure. It is very possible, not likely, that if the U.S. strikes the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran will try to hit the little Satan, the outpost of American values. The Israelis must have plans for that. Also plans for Hezbollah, the Houthis, whoever else is left in the list of proxies of Iran, all with whom will no doubt want to come to the defense of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But at that point, it seems to me that the Israelis will say to President Trump, they're hitting us, we have to hit back. May we, mother may I, or daddy may I. And I think he would say, yes, do what you need to do, and we have your back. Am I wrong on that? Is that not how you see this unfolding?
I mean, I agreed with your previous take that it's more likely that Donald Trump does the big mission and then turns it over to Israel and says, pick the rest apart. I could see that as much more in the offing than the second analogy. And a big $1 million question in the second thing that you drew, Cliff, is what's the order, right? Because Israel's been fairly silent here for the past 2 months, actually. What drives that silence? Is it missile interceptor math? Is it getting the network in place on the ground in Iran, which, by the way, was a huge part of their success, as Reuel mentioned, the domestic intelligence side? Or is it, trying to, win credits with the president to do something else that's related to the operation? And will it be Israeli-American strikes, American-Israeli strikes, or American then potentially Israeli? I don't know, but I think this is the most fascinating thing to speculate about. Like who gets what, and how does it actually commence?
Well, your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, um, from the Israeli side, I mean, if this turns out to be a joint operation, then the Israelis have obviously are in a better position. If it isn't a joint operation, then I don't know. I mean, there's certainly a lot of coordination taking place, and I would go back again. That the only long-term solution to this is the collapse of the Islamic Republic. If that is the only long-term solution, then all targeting should be, or much of the targeting should be directed at the institutions that allow it to survive. I don't think nukes and missiles are at the top of that list. There are other reasons to go after the nukes and missiles, but the far more important targets are elsewhere. Now, again, as I've said before, I don't know if we have the intelligence and the capacity to do that. And there's going to be, if we see large demonstrations return to Iran, it's likely they're going to be down the road. So the test of American resolve isn't going to be in the next few days, assuming Donald Trump attacks. It's going to be down the road when the Iranians, assuming they go back on the street in numbers. And that's going to be a challenge. Try to figure out, is there a way that we can actually support them? And my guess would be is the Americans are going to be completely unprepared for that. Whether the Israelis are capable, have the capacity to respond to that, I don't know. I hope so. But that's going to be the great challenge. And it's going to be overwhelmingly, again, a challenge that the Iranian people have to bear.
Well, tense days ahead. We'll all be watching very carefully over this weekend and into next week.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Reuel. Thank you, Behnam. And thanks to all of you who have been with us today here on Foreign Policy.